Hi, everybody. For this lecture, we're going to be talking about emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is a really popular topic, and it's been widely agreed as something that's critical for success. In fact, quite a few people indicate that it's more important than having a high IQ and academic success. When we're talking about career success, emotional intelligence is huge. Um, but if you look at a lot of the literature, it's not really very well defined. So kind of a really good focus question as we go through these slides. Try to think about what is emotional intelligence? How do we define it? How can mastering your emotions benefit you? And then how can mismanaging emotions be detrimental, right? The flip side of that coin. And so be thinking about those as we go through, and hopefully the answer to those questions will become evident. And so there's just a really good quote there that I put up, really just kind of focusing on the importance of being able to manage our emotions. And so Anthony Robbins says, right, uh, every great successful person has a way to stay calm and clear and powerful in the midst of these things. And I just thought that was a really good quote. So there's four main components to emotional intelligence that we can really separate into two different columns. One is within ourselves, and then the other one is kind of outward, more communicating with others. And as we take a look at this, the first one within ourselves, and these are in order of how we need to be aware of these and how we need to master these. We've got emotional self-awareness. So just kind of think about what that means, self-awareness and our emotions, knowing our feelings in the moment, right? So if we're aware of our own feelings, we're keenly aware of our changing moods, and we can better plot our lives around those. For example, emotional self-awareness helps us deal effectively with feeling overwhelmed, um, instead of maybe having an escape or things like that, right? So if I'm depressed and I recognize that I'm depressed, I can kind of deal with that depression a little better and maybe find a healthy coping mechanism rather than maybe going and getting drunk. That's a really bad way to deal with depression. And that's an extreme case. If I'm aware that I'm upset, or if I'm really steamed, I'm irate, I probably shouldn't maybe send a text message or things like that. And so recognizing our emotion is the first step, right? So recognizing that I'm overjoyed about something, or realizing that I'm a little frustrated, recognizing those emotions. The next piece in within ourselves is self-management, and I touched a little bit about that. We have to be able to be self-aware in order to self-manage. And this stuff's true outside of emotions, and we're talking about that a little bit too. But when we're talking about emotional intelligence, we need to be self-aware in order to have better self-management. So this is a situation where, let's say I get a grade back on an exam, or I get feedback on a paper that really makes me mad. I mean, I'm just hot with anger because I talked to the teacher and they told me to write it this way, and then they give me a bad grade. Um, it would be a bad idea to send an email immediately. So good emotional self-awareness, I recognize that I'm really upset. And then emotional self-management, because I realize I'm upset, I realize that maybe I shouldn't write that email in that moment. Maybe I should think about it, think about what's going on, and handle the situation a little differently. Or I certainly shouldn't storm into the teacher's office and start shouting at them. Those would be bad decisions affected by a heightened emotion, right? So recognizing our emotion, and then dealing with ourselves and knowing the emotion. Those are two very important things. Managing the strong feelings. And so then looking at communicating with others, we have social awareness, right? So empathizing accurately with other people's emotions. And so it's really, empathy is a fundamental people skill, being able to kind of put ourselves in somebody else's shoes. So for example, social awareness will help us notice and offer comfort if somebody's consumed by anxiety or sadness. So maybe if you see your roommate who appears to be really sad, you recognize that and you go, hey, are you okay? And then they talk to you, and you can really put yourself in their shoes. The next piece is relationship management. And so it's really similar, this column, to the other column, right? If we have to have good social awareness, we have to be able to empathize accurately with other people's emotions to then be able to have the relationship management, to be able to handle emotions in a relationship with skill and harmony. So let's look at kind of a situation maybe with your roommate, right? If you have an argument, or even before you have the argument, to be able to recognize that maybe they're already upset. And so then you manage that relationship, you handle your roommate being upset with skill and harmony rather than doing something else to maybe make them more upset when they're already upset. And so if we look at these four components, they all work together, right? The better we are at emotional self-awareness, the easier it'll be to have social awareness. And they really go in this order: emotional self-awareness first, self-management second. And then if we master that within ourselves, then social awareness and relationship management. And so name some emotions, right? Think about some emotions. And I've mentioned a few throughout this presentation, but try to think of things beyond happy, sad, and angry. So here's a group, right? And you'll see each one of these groups that I'll bring up, they're kind of similar, but using a lot of different words. A lot of times we might be timid or worried or nervous or anxious. And certainly anxious is something that happens when you're talking about school. A lot of times you can become anxious. And so we need to be careful. We need to not allow our anxiety to affect our decision making, right? We've got upset, mad. Right, here's a group that seems pretty sad, but different words. Here's an exciting one, right? Excited, overjoyed, heartbroken, somber. Here's one where I think that can really happen, right? When we're frightened. If we're really scared, that can affect our decision making sometimes. And if you look at all these can affect our decision making, and not just the bad ones, right? If we're really excited about something, if we're overjoyed, if we're thrilled, sometimes we can have that affect our decision making. So the bottom line when you're looking at emotional intelligence, and if you don't take anything else away from this presentation, remember, don't make any decisions in a heightened emotional state. Right? Allow yourself to kind of get a little bit back to the equilibrium before you start making decisions. You can be out with some friends, all caught up, having a great time, and maybe make a decision that you might then regret. It might not be the wisest choice that you could make. Or if we look, right, and we're upset, or if we have some of those feelings. Like being ashamed, right? If we're remorseful or sorrowful, we can make some choices that are heavily influenced by those emotions. So to be pretty emotionally intelligent, we need to be able to recognize those emotions within ourselves, and then have that, recognize that, and then manage ourselves accordingly. One example that I like to talk about, let's say you and your roommate are in your dorm room, and your roommate spills a giant Dr. Pepper all over your bed, right? I mean, it's sugary, it's going to be sticky, it's a mess, it stains. What kind of emotion would that evoke in you? Right? And so we got to kind of go through these and look at this column first, right? Emotional self-awareness. How do you feel when this happens, right? I would imagine you'd be pretty upset, maybe irate, right? You're thinking back to some of those words that we saw on the previous slide. And then the emotional self-management, to recognize how we feel. So we're pretty upset. And so what are we going to do about it? And the next one, which, if you think about yourself in this situation, it might be hard, but the social awareness and the relationship management, being able to recognize how your roommate feels, right? Being able to kind of see that. If their eyes are welling up with tears, feel so bad, they didn't mean to do it, they feel awful, you can kind of see that guilt just welling up inside of them. You'd be able to react a little differently, right? And so your ability to be socially aware can affect the way that you handle that relationship. So all these things can kind of come into play. So you can think of a couple different scenarios, right? The Dr. Pepper gets spilled. I get super pissed off. I punch my roommate in the face, right? I didn't, or maybe I did recognize that I was irate, but I had poor emotional self-management. And because of that, I made the decision to punch them in the face, and that could have some pretty bad consequences, right? I have to go to a conduct hearing. I could maybe get kicked out of the dorms, maybe face some charges for assault, things like that. Or my social awareness, right? I look at them and they feel totally guilty, but then I still berate them for it and like throw it in their face. That's not gonna develop the best relationship with that roommate. That's probably gonna be a bad relationship. And so this module is talking about developing and building relationships. And so the better we can be with this emotional intelligence piece, the better we're gonna build those relationships. And so, I mean, especially you look at this example, this scenario, that's a tough situation. There's no happiness is going to come out. However, sometimes we have those situations and we have to find the best way out. So one of the assignments for this module is a discussion within Canvas. And so read through the case study that's posted there. The case study is called Aftermath. It's a quick one-page read. I mean, it should take you not very long to read through it all, about these characters, right? Professor Bishop, Michael, and the others. And it's an scenario that happens during a math class. And so some of these people react maybe a little better than others. Some of them react pretty badly. So I'm excited to see your posts in the discussion. And be sure you do your initial post and then come back and look at some of your classmates and make some comments, whether you agree with them or disagree. And be sure in the discussion forum, right, be as good as if you're in class. Be respectful. Constructive criticism's good. If you disagree, be sure you say why, that sort of thing. I'm excited to read what you have to say. This is a really, really critical component to success, not just in school, but in your career after.